any kind of strategy is about a really small number of things, and it's about really understanding the vision for where you want to get to, understanding your objectives, understanding the things that will never change, so the big stuff, vision, mission, objectives, those things, and understanding the smaller things that are going to help you get there, which I guess you could call tactics or whatever.
Welcome to What Gets Measured, a NinjaCat podcast about marketing, performance management, metrics, and effectiveness. Because what gets measured gets managed. I'm your host, Jake Sanders. Tom Roach is a VP of brand strategy at Jellyfish, a global ad agency out of the UK. Over his decades of experience, he's worked at Adam and Eve DDB, BBH London, Leo Burnett. His work has been awarded several times by the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising. He is a font of knowledge and a great follow on social. And he's here today to talk about brand strategy. Mr. Roach, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Jake. It's great to be here.
So glad you could join us today. I figured we should just start with a kind of a basic primer, because there seems to be a lot of strategies out there in marketing. And how do you think brand strategy is defined and differentiated from business strategy? And then two, why the hell are there so many strategies?
Okay, yeah, it's such a kind of, it's a tedious and live debate in the if you follow advertising strategy or planning Twitter, there's a kind of ongoing, really dull question, which is it strategy or is it planning? I'm glad you didn't ask that question.
No way. I'm not opening up that.
You know, it's just really, it's that question. And there's another really boring question that keeps coming up, which is, what's an insight? Which we could cover if you want. But,
my kidneys hurt just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's tedious. I'm sorry. What's the question of what is business strategy and what was it advertising strategy?
Brand strategy.
Brand strategy. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, isn't it? I mean, I guess we all know that the proper consultants do that really heavy lifting thing called business strategy, and it probably looks, it looks really boring, and there's loads of matrices and technical stuff that goes on in that world that us lowly brand or marketing or communications or advertising strategists couldn't possibly understand or believe or know about. But there is, I do think there are obviously overlaps. Any kind of strategy is about a really small number of things, and it's about really understanding the vision for where you want to get to, understanding your objectives, understanding the things that will never change, so the big stuff, vision, mission, objectives, those things, and understanding the smaller things that are going to help you get there, which I guess you could call tactics or whatever. So objective, strategy, tactics. There's a British guy called Alistair Campbell who was famous in the kind of, well, he still is famous actually, but he was Tony Blair's spin doctor, Tony Blair's kind of comms guy.
Yeah.
And he always talks about objective, strategy, tactics, OST, and his story about how the Labour government came into power in 97 is all about that. And he's really fixed on, you have big fixed objectives that you never stray from. You have tactics which can be more flexible that help you get there. And that is that strategy. And whether you apply that to big commercial things like businesses or smaller subsets of a big thing like a business, like it's marketing, or even smaller, it's communications or it's brand, then I think the same principles apply. And essentially, I think when we were talking before about what this conversation was going to be about, I think I used the phrase, it's fractal. You can expand, or you can go macro, or you can go micro. Everybody that does anything believes themselves to be doing something strategic, but equally everybody also has tactics. So I think you can get a bit sort of semantic about it and a bit precious, and everybody will have their view that what I do is strategic and what that person does is tactical. And there's a kind of snobbery or chauvinism about it. But I think the best of what anybody does has big stuff, and it has small stuff, and it has objectives, and it has tactics. And strategy and execution are all they're two sides of a coin. My favorite was when I was at AMV BBDO, and there's a brilliant guy called Michael Bulk, and he told me once, I think it was probably a David Abbott thing, the really legendary copywriter and creative director at AMV. He used to define strategy as really simply the bit before the ads. He's like, oh, that's a really great bit before the ads you just did there, Tom. And that was like a really high compliment. And it was basically the stuff that comes before the stuff that you then make. So
then that might explain why there's so many strategies, because everybody is maybe gunning for a position to think that, oh, I'm doing strategic work, or there are a lot of things that happen before an ad. But then digital marketing kind of has messed this up, because you have a social media strategy, you have an influencer strategy, you have an affiliate strategy, or whatever that is. Is that kind of the reason why there's been this explosion of things, strategies, different types, or is it because people want to feel special?
I think it's always because people want to feel special and they want to feel one above the next person in the chain.
Sure.
But I think it's on something there, which is, I think it's no secret that there has been a massive fragmentation in the world of media, in the media landscape. And so you get people saying, what's your TikTok strategy? What's your Instagram strategy? What's your whatever strategy? So, and, let's not be rude about those people saying those things. I think people can get a bit kind of snobbish about it. Right. Basically, they're going, what the fuck are we going to do on TikTok is what they're saying, but they don't want to say it in such a crass way.
Right.
Are we allowed to swear on this podcast? I don't know.
Yes, you are. Well, it's too late now, Tom.
It's really funny. On British chat shows, you get American guests coming on and they'll swear and they'll always say, are we allowed to say that here? And of course, on a British chat show, it's fine because we're not so worried about swearing as you guys are.
Right. Well, we have different standards. Like, you can see people blown to bits, but we can't say a certain curse word or, just that's our strategy, I guess. So just run me through, like, a new client comes into Jellyfish. Maybe they have a brand strategy. Maybe they don't. How do you what's your first meeting like? What kind of questions are you asking? How do you kind of kickstart your brand strategy work?
Yeah. Well, the really interesting thing in that question, when you say what's a conversation like with Jellyfish and a new client, because we have so many different kinds of capabilities. So we're, the old world where you had creative agency or a media agency, or you might have some data people or even some technology people. We do all of that. So initial conversations can be quite wide ranging, and they can be actually sometimes quite confusing, because you're trying to work out what is the client's issues that they've got. How can we help them? So it's like any other conversation you would ever have with a client, where you're just trying to understand them as a business, understand their kind of the journey they're on, understanding where they are now, where they want to get to, and then trying to work out, okay, what do we have in our armory that we can help them with? What's really exciting about Jellyfish is because we have, and maybe I need to describe kind of a bit of our history and where we come from.
Yes, please. Yeah.
We've got a history as a performance marketing agency. We grew very fast over the last kind of 10 years through performance and through developing a strong paid media capability and data and technology. We're a big reseller of Google's technology platforms and other kinds of tech. Mm-hmm. And we have a strong kind of proprietary tech kind of basis of our own. And we've got a really strong data and analytics function. And as we've grown, we've developed and acquired creative businesses as well. So we have strong creative and production capabilities. And when you have that, and when you're getting more and more into social, and not only paid social, but organic social content, you then also need to think about the sort of the holistic view of the brand. So we've developed, I guess you could say, and I often say this, we've been heading up the funnel to develop a kind of full funnel modern marketing services kind of suite of tools and capabilities. And my personal journey is I've come from the creative agency world, so I've been more at the kind of upper funnel end of things, and I kind of jumped out of that world and into this one. So I've headed sort of down the funnel, if you like. So we've kind of met in the middle.
So the strategy is different for a creative agency versus a performance agency versus, you know, sort of like people who are focusing on paid, you know, media. And it's interesting that all of those things are available to you. How do you help people kind of focus in on the things that are going to work? Is that aligned with their goals? And then you say the tactics are here and we'll use this to get there? Or are people kind of bullish on certain things? Maybe they don't need to be, you know, I mean, how do you sort of talk people out of their preconceived notions into things that work?
What's fascinating coming from the world I've come to, because I came from the world of creative agencies where you're developing like big brand platforms, let's call them big ideas. Mm-hmm. And often those are expressed through TV commercials or out of home or you know, maybe a more limited set of channels. And I've gone into a world where we have probably a wider array of tools and tactical things available to us, but perhaps we've got and historically had less of the kind of big brand thinking. So that kind of, what is the big thing that we're going to do here? What's the big vision for the brand? What are the big ways we can express that brand positioning creatively, possibly through like a big idea, as I've said. And so I suspect the world of traditional creative agencies and their media kind of media sister agencies are better at the kind of big brand idea type thinking, and the world I'm now in has been better at the kind of smaller tactical stuff that we now have so many different tactics available to us. And so I think the ambition of certainly of a brand strategist within a place like Jellyfish is to try and do some of the same big brand thinking, but with a much wider array of tools, like a bigger toolkit to play with, less restricted by the notion that we can only express this brand through a big TV commercial or through a big brand idea. But acknowledging that both those two sides of the coin are really powerful, because any brand, you know, you may have a million like tiny places to execute that brand and for people to experience it, but it means nothing if it's not all adding up to one thing and giving people the same brand experience, or if it's disconnected in some way. And you know, we know that from our experience of the brands we meet in our daily lives. When it's a McDonald's or a Coke or other brands are available, you know, you just know it when it's consistent and it's speaking with the same voice. And that's just a really powerful thing. It's 1 + 1 = 3.
So, which makes sense. So, and you're bringing up a really good point, because a lot of the information that marketers of any ilk or vertical or size are getting are from these large companies like Disney, Apple, Coke, you know, Nike, as you call them, but it's Nike. But anyway, as you see those things, a lot of smaller tiered marketers are like, I want to be the Apple. I want to do the Disney thing. Like, we're going to be like Coke. Usually the thing that stops them is their budget. Because you're like, that's cool. That's really amazing. Do you have Coke money? Do you have Apple money? Because you don't.
Have $150 million to paint the world pink for your movie and your amazing toys.
Right. Way to go, Mattel. But that, I mean, you know, do you have a lot of people coming with those sort of delusions? What's your thoughts on the fact that a lot of the things that we're compared to are this top 1%? And you like, is there something that you are struggling with, or you see clients struggling with, or?
I think mostly clients are realistic about their budgets and what they can achieve.
Yeah.
And I think mostly, you know, small businesses, smaller brands, they may look to those brands as aspirations, but they knew that those took 60, 70 years, 100 years to build. So So I
Right.
think they're realistic. I mean, it's brilliant, isn't it, when brands kind of go on a kind of, accelerated journey and really decide intentionally to pump themselves up and to spend more on marketing and brand building and to do things differently. One of the frustrations, I think, is when brands, and I've written about this in a thing about the performance plateau, which is this notion that kind of a lot of digital brands will start small, they'll scale up, but they'll reach a bit of a plateau because they don't know how to get to the next level, because they've had a kind of performance oriented mindset, and they've only done lots of the short term stuff, which only it might get you good ROI, but it's not building the brand long term. So there's a kind of mindset shift that has to happen at that level. So you do sometimes see brands slightly struggling with that and trying to work out how to reconfigure their KPIs and reconfigure the media that they're in, and kind of unthink and unlearn what they've learned, and that can be a bit of a kind of gear shift moment. But I think brilliant when you see them escaping it. At the moment you're seeing quite a lot of B2B brands doing good things. I think Salesforce is a great example of a brand that is applying kind of big brands, a big B2C brand thinking, more of that kind of stuff that we know from like all the marketing scientists that we now have their thinking available to us, whether it's about Lesbinet and 60/40 rule, or the need for emotion, all these things, these big principles that we now know work. And you're beginning to see more B2B brands, I think, applying that kind of thinking. And Salesforce is an example. Of course, they've got enormous budgets themselves, but they're behaving like a B2C brand. That's quite exciting, I think.
And you said the magic word, Lesbinet. Before we were talking, we were getting this show together, and we were talking about the differences in between the US approach to marketing and advertising, and then this UK Ehrenberg Bass kind of informed marketing science stuff. Yeah. And for the folks out there that aren't familiar with this, can you just sort of give us like the elevator pitch for where Les is coming from? Where folks like Byron Sharp and Jenny Romanek, like where are those folks coming from? And then also, can you speak to why it's not landing here in the US as hard? Because it seems like a lot of UK folks are familiar with it and use it, probably experience the same frustrations. But so give me the pitch for that stuff, and then talk to me about the dichotomy in between US and UK.
So we are very lucky in the UK, and I guess kind of, there's a sort of axis between the UK, Australia, New Zealand. We've got these institutions, like in the UK, we've got the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising, the IPA.
Right.
And in Australia, they've got the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. And they are kind of real centers of excellence and learning about how advertising and marketing works. And I don't know how old the EBI is in Australia, but the IPA is ancient. But since 1980, they've been collecting advertising effectiveness case studies, proving the value of advertising, proving that it works. Mad that you think we've got to prove it, but we do keep having to keep reproving and proving that it works. And it's an industry body, the likes of which doesn't really exist in the US. And so we've got this body of knowledge, and there's two amazing characters in the UK called Lesbinet and Peter Field, who've mined this database of insight, and they've written a succession of seminal books, the most important of which was called The Long and the Short of It. And The Long and the Short of It says all sorts of brilliant things, but the most central kind of thesis at its heart is the notion that there are two ways in which advertising works. One is over the longer term, and another is in the short term. And both those things need to happen in conjunction, in a rough balance of maybe about like 60/40, that kind of balance. And the longer term stuff works over a longer period, has a longer lasting impact. And the shorter term stuff, more kind of sales driving advertising and communication, has a higher ROI, but doesn't shift your brand in the long term. It just does it. It has a really good immediate sales driving job. So do those two things together, and you have a kind of perfect synergy. So that's Les and Peter. In Australia, you've got the Edinburgh Bass Institute, a guy called Professor Byron Sharp, who has taken on the work of an academic advertising guy called Andrew Ehrenberg, proved all sorts of things. We can't go into all of it, but one really key thing is around the importance of driving penetration as the way that brands grow, as opposed to driving frequency and loyalty.
And
very, very long book about that, but we'll story about it. But we can. That's one of the key lemons.
I mean, how brands grow. When I read that, my face slipped off of my skull, because I was like, wait, what? Hold on. Somebody's just saying this in a very relatable way, taking a lot of that science and just making it meaningful, and then just kind of explaining things that you sort of knew. And that's where I was like, am I experiencing confirmation bias? Because it was like, I think we're obsessed with product-driven growth. And I think that sort of slows us down. And there's some kind of magical thinking. And I think maybe it is a very US based thing. You know, it's sort of like, if I can just make the perfect this, then everyone will come. It's a field of dreams kind of thing. If you build it, they'll show up. And go ahead.
I think there's kind of, because the second part of your question was around what is the difference between this UK, Australia, New Zealand thing versus the US.
Right.
It seems to be a much more practical approach to advertising, marketing, communication in the US, which is just, let's just do it. Let's just, there's a much more hard sell, I guess. And it's sort of simpler and more kind of down to earth. I think the US isn't so interested in theory, is a bit more interested in practice. The UK approach that has developed a load of kind of theory and theoretical kind of thinkers and thought leaders. There's a whole kind of raft of them. Haven't really broken into the US market in the way that they might want to. And you've got people like Byron Sharp, and there's a Mark Ritson and Les and Peter and Jenny Romano. I don't think they're as big in the States as they are in the rest of the world. I'm sure their work isn't being read there as much. And I think it's just, you love case studies of success. You like people just to be practical and just to get on and do it. You probably are less interested in people just wanging on about it. And so there is a kind of wealth of knowledge that has slightly gone unread and unobserved and unnoticed, but I'm sure it'll have its moment, or at least practical applications of the thinking will be celebrated. And you can see it in the work that McDonald's are doing now in the US and globally. All of the principles that those guys that I've mentioned talk about is in the really great successful campaigns, and it's working. And you can see what one of them look at Amazon, look at Jeff Bezos's, he used to claim that advertising was a tax on poor product. And then Amazon learned through its own data and evidence that was not the case. Amazon became, not only one of the biggest advertisers, but one of the best. It does Super Bowl ads brilliantly. It has become a huge advertising business in itself, and the rise of retail media that it is kind of leading. So it is one of the most significant U-turns in advertising history. The Bezos U-turn from advertising is a tax on a poor product to, not only is it one of the most powerful drivers of growth in a business, it is one of the biggest businesses in the world. So I think the case study there in Amazon is probably has a load of lessons for us in how, if these kind of intellectuals and academics in Australia and UK want to get their work applied, well, it is being applied, and Amazon is a brilliant case study for it. So I kind of wouldn't worry too much about the lack of intellectual stuff going on in the US. I think it is happening. It's just happening practically.
Right. Well, and you inspired me. I'm thinking right now, it's like Amazon could afford to pivot because they had the money. And I think a lot of people are thinking, well, when we get it going, when we get some money, we make some more money, we're going to market. Then we're going to sort of, and it's a sort of a cart horse situation. And I don't think it's as dichotomous as that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are saying that would be nice to put aside some good marketing budget and start, but let's just see if people like it. And then maybe once we start making money, we'll start paying for attention. You know, like I think maybe a lot of people are just relying on word of mouth or something like that. Just some like, this is just small potato thinking. But it made me think, of course, Amazon could pivot after they made millions of dollars, you know, and gathered up the research. But what is your piece of brand strategic advice to people thinking that I don't need to put money towards marketing now? Let me wait until the product's good. Let me wait until the product's real good. You know, like what's your thoughts there for that?
It's hard, isn't it? So this point about Amazon is they had the billions.
Billions, yeah. I said millions. Come on, man.
Billions and billions. Of course, huge business. Of course, they had and money was cheap when they were doing all of this.
That's right.
Money is no longer cheap. It's now quite expensive, and we have to be cognizant of that. There's thousands, millions of brands out there that just don't have the resources.
Right.
I think there are still lessons to be learned, and you often hear, don't you, brands saying, "But what about these? Do these rules you're talking about? They don't really apply to us little small brands, do they?" I genuinely think most of the principles that are discussed in all the books we talked about do typically apply to small brands. Of course, there are differences, and of course the channels you have access to can be different. But I do think the playing field has never been flatter in terms of access to advertising. It used to be that TV was the only channel you could get on, and that's there was a kind of threshold that you had to break through to be able to afford to be on TV. Certainly in the UK, that was the case. But now with this array of platforms that we've got available to us, you can be a tiny business and you can make a significant difference just by a small amount of advertising spend. And so I think the notion that somehow advertising is for big brands only and not small ones is well, if you believe that, just don't advertise, and you won't grow in the same way that you could if you did. So I suspect what ends up happening is that the brands that do take a leap, or do find some success, do get some more budget, they break out of it and they find a way to succeed and to grow. Advertising is not the only route to growth, by the way, but it is a pretty good one.
It's very good. So, it's sort of, it's a pay to play thing. And most people are like, let's just wait until we generate some like organic, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said when you're small to find free ways to advertise. My 14-year-old is making TikTok videos for a local sneaker store. He walked into our local store in Cambridge and said, "I've seen your TikToks, they're not very good. I think I can make them better." And now he's earning 10 quid an hour on a Saturday afternoon making videos for a little store that's now a year old, and they're lapping their sales now and are doing really, really well. And I'm sure that he's grown their following on TikTok from, I think, 900 followers to 20,000, half of whom are in the local area, which means probably, it's not a big town, Cambridge, where I live. And so that means probably most of the sneakerheads in the region are seeing these videos. And they for almost no money have put this little store on the map. And now they have people coming in who recognize my kids when they come in.
Well, and it's weird because you're like, well, I don't know if my kids are going to be into it. Will they want to do what dad does? But it's almost, if you hang out in any elementary school, all these kids want to be YouTube influencers. Nobody wants to be a astronaut anymore. What I mean? Yeah,
and it's a bit worrying. It's a bit sad, but it's only like, the celebrity is changing, of course, and let's call. I'm less excited by the notion of influencers than the creator economy that I think is that is becoming huge. And I guess my kids, my 14-year-old is somehow a small early part of that, and that's really, really exciting to see and to watch. And he looks up to all of those YouTubers, and is very excited. He's really excited that all the kids in UK schools are obsessed with Prime, or have been for the last couple of years. Prime, the energy drink, the KSI and Logan Paul drink, which is a really, really interesting case study, I think, in how you grow a brand today. In some ways, there are new things that they're doing. The kind of reliance on organic content that those two are creating, the fact that you've got these two individuals who appear to be the kind of CEOs, founders of a business, of a brand, but in other ways it's very traditional stuff. They've got distribution in Walmart. They're sponsoring football clubs. They're sponsoring UFC. They're sponsoring stars, and that's football stars. So they're doing lots of new things and many established things, and the new things aren't particularly like new principles. It's just new tactical ways of doing celebrity in today.
And I think you bring up a good point, is like there are a lot of new ways to do these things, but the animus, the goals, the outcomes are very much the same, have not changed. It's about market share. It's about, pushing past a certain threshold, taking what you have, using your resources, being scrappy. But you mentioned something on LinkedIn. Well, this was a few weeks back, and this sort of transitions into that new type of advertising. But it was about the attention problem in digital advertising. You were citing research that shows 85% of digital ads didn't hold attention for longer than 2.5 seconds. And the goldfish thing, we will not hear that here on this podcast, because everyone says, no one has attention spans anymore.
No. People are very happy to watch very long TV shows.
That's what I was just going to say. Y'all watch Game of Thrones for 8 hours in one day. So I want you to talk about your work with effectiveness and what you think brands and agencies can do to generate and hold attention. And then also talk about this 2.5 threshold.
So let's talk about the attention thing. So Karen Nelson Field, who's another one of these Australians, she used to work at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. She now is an expert in attention measurement, and she's done all sorts of work, but particularly looking at, within the new platforms we have, how much attention typically are ads getting on them. And so she did a piece looking at, I think they looked at 130,000 ad impressions, and they saw that 85% of them weren't achieving this kind of, I think 85% of them were getting less than 2.5 seconds of attention.
Right.
There are debates about whether attention is necessary, or how much attention is necessary to deliver brand memories. And there's a load of people who go that you actually can build a brand through much lower involvement processing. You don't need such active attention. But leaving that aside, the work she's done suggests that there are, essentially the more seconds of attention you get to your advertising, the more memories you create. And the more memories you create, the longer lasting the sales impact you can have from your work. The big problem these days being that the platforms we've got are not as good at delivering seconds of attention as the previous generation's kind of dominant platform, the TV. And so I think the work that she's done, and people like Lumen, other research companies, will say things like a 30-second TV commercial will typically get about 13 seconds of attention. A YouTube video of 15 seconds might get 7 seconds of attention. A Facebook ad might get 3 seconds, that kind of thing. So there's the kinds of formats and ads we've got to play with these days that are increasingly the kind of dominant way we're advertising our brands. The screens are smaller. The feeds we're serving ads in are very scrollable past. So there's kind of technical reasons why essentially the ads are getting smaller and shorter.
Right.
But the fundamentals are the same. Fundamentals of, in the old days, I was there to watch TV shows, not ads. just as when I'm scrolling through my feeds, I'm there to look at the great content, the funny stuff I want to see. Not
I was
the
just
ads.
thinking channel surfing, like that, like scrollable stuff. We've
exactly,
been
exactly. So when you look at some of the kind of classic quotes, and I'm going to forget them now, but by people like Bernbach saying, attention is all that matters. Without attention, everything else is academic.
right.
The fundamental principles of what we're trying to achieve have not changed. We are trying to essentially interrupt or slightly hijack the attention they're giving to other stuff, so that they can pay a bit of attention to the stuff that we're showing them about our brands. Sometimes people are a bit more engaged in that stuff than other times. Sometimes they're in the markets, they're a bit more attentive than other times. But essentially, the game is the same. It never has changed. It's about getting eyeballs on our brands and products.
And so this is making me think of how. I get it. It's great. Strategy, good. Channels, check. Now, what the hell do we put in this ad? Let's just get a celebrity. Let's just get, most people are not using jingles or mascots. When you talk about Salesforce, there is a very prominent mascot there. There's something there. There's sort of this peek into a place where we're like, I guess there's like a mountain and there's a raccoon guy and, there's all these things. And so we're interested in stories, talk about Orlando Woods, stuff about creative attention and what brings us in. And it's drama, it's stories, it's characters, music, those things. And so most ads now are monogram, like things, monosyllabic watches, there's like a poet reading something about breaking through the ice and all of this. And it's just kind of flat. Like, just speaking about brand strategy stuff, thinking about your experience with creative, what are your advice? What's your advice here to people? Like, it's like nobody wants to hear a listing of your product features. No one really cares if it's 10% faster or whatever. There's 20% more, or it's made with whatever, organic linen, something.
But even that, so that kind of product centric lack of customer centricity and lack of understanding about what people are really interested in. That's only the same issue. We have that issue these days, but it's only the same issue that Bernbach was dealing with when he was trying to work out how to advertise VWs, the Beetle back in the 60s, and car ads at the time were obsessed with certain things. I think obsessed with features on the car, obsessed with the
speed
the speed of the things that went.
Right.
I tend to think there are also like trends and fashions and these things, aren't there? And, you talk about jingles and characters, they've gone out of fashion. They were huge in the, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Right.
I think those things they come from a TV world. Those kinds of character-based advertising approaches. I think I love them and I think they work. I can sort of understand why they've fallen out of fashion a bit. I think it probably is something that when you're developing TV campaigns that are definitely going to be moving, you can afford animation, you can see why creating a character for your cereal brand or whatever might be the way to go. I love that Salesforce have done something very different from their category in developing a set of characters in the same way. And I think that points to me to the fundamental here, which is the importance of just doing things that are different from what people expect. The human brain is really hardwired to be attracted to things that seem a bit different. When I was at BBH agency in London, their kind of mascot themselves, their icon is a black sheep, because their first ever ad for Levi's, for black Levi's, was a flock of white sheep going one way and one single black sheep going the other. And the end line was Levi's, when the world zigs, zag. And this notion of zagging when the world zigs became the thing that BBH kind of sold as its proposition, essentially. So everything, when you're at BBH, you're obsessed with difference, obsessed with understanding a category and its codes, and then changing something so that it attracts attention. And if you attract attention, you attract the eyes and the ears and the senses, you get the brain engaged with of the consumers you're trying to appeal to. And they're a bit more likely to take in your message and a bit more likely to remember it and a bit more likely to buy your brand. And I think it's basically as simple as that. So I wouldn't, I don't know, we can get obsessed with fashions and trends and what is the latest way of serving up advertising, and in certain generations it's looked a certain way. I think we all recognize what a kind of modern brand looks like on Instagram or TikTok these days, and it's probably, yes, you have to play by the rules of the platform. You have to look like you're doing stuff that fits that platform. In fact, talking about Karen Nelson-Field, one of her things is fitness for platform is one of the essential ways that you get attention on a given platform. But that's kind of technical stuff. So fitness for platform is really important. But I think then surprising people, engaging people by doing something different that zags, that defies category conventions is really, really important. In fact, there was some research I saw that the Ipsos research company had done looking at watch time on I can't remember which platform it was, but it was certain kinds of video ads. They said that if you do something that defies category conventions, you will get 40% more watch time on average. Of course, these kinds of rules are always averages and don't believe averages, but you can get a significant chunk more watch time if you do something that's different. And the biggest crime, I think there's two big crimes that most advertisers do. One is not branding their thing correctly so that people don't even know who it's for. But the main one is not doing something that's different and that's going to get you attention. So difference, I think, is essential to getting attention. That is different, by the way, from this slightly other tedious debate of.
I know. I was just about to say. I was like, "Oh, they're going off about that."
There's another debate about differentiation and distinctiveness that rumbles on in the world of advertising, especially Twitter, which we can. I don't know if you want to.
No, we don't have to. But I think your main thing is understanding where you're at, understanding what people expect, and then finding a way to look the part, but do something a little different, no matter where you are. Advertising, marketing, it could apply to every different, maybe internal culture. Another thing is just thinking about BBH having that ethos drive all of the work and having people, hey, let's try and make something crazy. Let's do that on purpose. I think a lot of people are like, I'm going to do what the client wants me to do and collect the check. And you're like, a fascinating strategy,
Yeah, and that's a choice. And
that's a choice.
Many great agencies have made billions from just doing what the client wants.
So brilliant.
And that's fine. And often the clients have developed their own really good understanding of what works.
Right.
And if you collectively, between you and the agency and the client, you've got a really, really great fundamental understanding of how things are working, then that's cool. Do what works. But I think far too often, people just fall into doing bland stuff that is just forgettable. And it's so weird, this thing of assuming that playing by the rules of a category somehow is the best way to do things. It's not a new disease. It's a disease that's always been there.
Timeless.
It feels safe to do, doesn't it? And I think it leads to really weird. You'll be on the Underground in London, and you'll see what we call tube cards, so kind of little mini out-of-home billboards within the carriages, and they'll just look like a PowerPoint slide. Maybe like a headline, 3 bullet points, a purple background, a picture of the product. And you're like, what? When did we think that a PowerPoint slide was an act? At what point did we decide that was okay? And I don't know. There's a certain kind of like startup that will do ads like that, and you're just like, God, you need an agency. You really need some professional help here, because you've got a designer, you've taken a slide from your pitch deck that worked to get your first bit of seed funding, whatever
Right.
it was, and now you've taken that slide from your pitch deck and stuck it in a tube train. This is not.
Well, I mean, and that's where marketing is that weird profession where accountants probably don't deal with this. They're like, well, I can do accounting. No one says that, but everyone thinks they're a marketer. They're like, oh, I have an idea.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? But it's a price you pay for having a job that's interesting. It's interesting because people see the stuff we do. A lot of us got into it because we wanted to make stuff that people would see, and maybe our parents would see, or maybe our mums would see,
right?
And that's part of the attraction. It's a really interesting problem we've got now that we no longer have channels where everybody will see the one thing you do. You need to make 10, 20, 30 things to cover all the bases, all the platforms, etc.
Yeah.
So you can't guarantee name in the way that you used to. That's a problem I think that we're all dealing with. But we still should be making stuff that we're proud of and that could get people excited about joining the industry again.
That's the clarion call right there. I mean, it's just like, be a part of the culture in which we came from, in which we can participate, in which we can maybe make people think differently or drive a behavior change. I mean, it's a wonderful profession. And
but I think it's really important that we don't just look back. I think it's really easy when you're having this conversation to slip into a nostalgia for what went before.
Right.
And I think we need to remember that great advertising, great communication has always looked a bit different from the stuff that it was surrounded by. And we're not going to go back to a world where 90-second TV commercials were the epitome of the form. That's not where the platforms are going. We have to be realistic about the smaller, shorter things that we're able to put out there. I think we have to be realistic about the way advertising is not doesn't have the cultural impact it used to have. But I do think brands can, and you look, and again, I'll use the Prime example, look at how that brand has been created using these new platforms, using celebrity, using decent marketing to construct a new product, and partnerships and all those kinds of things. Maybe there's not one single piece of video that team that have done those things could point to and go, that's an amazing ad, in the same way that I don't know, Burnback snowplow or whatever you could point to in the past. That's an amazing piece of brand building they're doing, and we can be proud of that as an industry.
Fantastic. So I wanted to pivot really quick because boy, we've gone over time, but I don't think there is a time limit with Tom Roach. But regardless, I have a couple more questions. We're really focused on measurements and metrics on this show. And I just wanted to get your thought about measuring the effectiveness of brand strategy. Like, what analytics are you looking at? Like, how are you helping sort of tabulate all of these amazing things we just talked about? Someone is going to be asking for a spreadsheet or some kind of like pie chart. Can you show me? Oh, don't get me started on pie charts. People hate pie charts, but they want to see some analytics. So how are you measuring that stuff? And then, how do you just track it?
Yeah. Okay. So the key is that before you even start, actually, you need to be thinking about what are the metrics you're trying to move. One of the problems these days, I think, is that we've got so addicted to some of the short-term metrics that are available to us in the platforms that we get very seduced by the kind of adrenaline rush of seeing some immediate short-term metrics spike. We're forgetting sometimes the longer-term metrics will take longer time to move. So you need to make sure you've got a blend of the slower-moving brand metrics that you can measure through a decent bit of brand tracking, or maybe just maybe a sort of brand lift study or two in the platforms, and the shorter-term stuff. and short-term stuff being whatever your kind of immediate, whether sales or behavioral kind of movements you want to see. And the really long-term stuff you want to be looking at. I mean, I'm a big fan of econometric modeling, or market mix modeling, as it's called, MMM. Some people think it's expensive. It's actually not hugely expensive. It can be time-consuming, though. It's just a really important part of the mix to measure the commercial impact of what you're doing, free from the really short-term movements that you're seeing. And MMM is just a great way to get kind of to see the incremental profit or sales that you're achieving across your entire marketing mix, and then split down by each individual channel as well. So big fan of MMM, but also a big fan of both longer-term brand metrics and short-term behavioral metrics as well. I really like share of search as a thing. I don't know if you've looked at that.
Oh, yes.
It's really helpful for certain categories, certain brands. Not always applicable, but it's a really smart, simple, easy thing to do. And it's what I like about it particularly is it's a way of people on the kind of brand side of the team can understand it, because of brand search being a kind of measure of basically a proxy for fame or mental availability for your brand, kind of a proxy for brand health. But it's also for more performance type of people an easy way to see how you're getting traffic from, and sort of some of that short-term stuff from spikes in search. The big fan of share of search as a way to kind of bring together two types of marketer who sometimes there are more things dividing them than joining them up.
God, so good. So I'll ask for links to specific places for people to look at. I mean, I had James Hankins on the show, a while back, and we went off Andrew Wilshire, Ian Barnard. There's a lot of really smart people talking about share of search, total addressable markets, like understanding the place where you're trying to make an impact. Most people don't do that. They're just trying to make an impact past their front door. So they're like, well, Instagram likes are up. And you're like, well, that's why you're fired. Can you give us a pivot real quick to stories? Just a couple quick stories about, like, maybe throughout your experience or with recent clients or something that you've seen in the wild about brand strategy where it's gone amazing. And then can you also give us a tale of brand strategy gone horrible and wrong?
Okay. On the first one, the really classic example, which I was lucky to be involved in and sort of write the case study of, was for a UK supermarket called Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Back in 2000, when was this? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Their business had been tanking. They had been they had a new management come in and say, look, we need to achieve business turnaround. They set a goal for 2.5 billion incremental sales. And they came to AMV BBDO. In fact, they were already our clients, but the pitch brief was, fix this for us, please. And
no pressure. We just need $2 billion, Tom.
Yeah, 2.5 billion. The strategy team looked at this kind of 2.5 billion and like, what the hell do we do with this? And actually, they investigated this a bit further, and the two brilliant people, Craig Maudsley and Bridget Angier, looked at them. They broke it down. They were like, okay, 2.5 billion pounds over 3 years. So take 2.5 billion, divided by 3. Then they divided by 52 weeks in the year. Then they divided it by 14 million customers. And they got to this magic number of £1.14. And so they said, okay, rather than thinking about this problem as being a £2.5 billion problem, let's think about it as a £1.14 problem in every basket. And then you've got something you can deal with, and you've got something creative people can deal with. So they were like, okay, how do we get people? Essentially, the business problem went from being, give us 2.5 billion extra sales, to put an extra £1.14 in every basket.
Wow.
So you've got really simple bit of back of an envelope math. By the way, this isn't brand strategy. It's not really business strategy. I don't know what it is, but it's just thinking. And so they took this £1.14 and they were like, hey, how do we turn this into a consumer? Like, where's the consumer insight that's going to help us drive that £1.14? And they looked to this notion that people who are shopping every day are basically just buying the same old things. They probably are buying five or six different kinds of meals in their weekly shop. And they're a bit stuck in a rut, and they coined this term, these people are sleep shopping. So they were like, okay, let's try and wake these people up. Let's inspire them to put one extra thing in their basket by giving them simple food ideas. So, and those food ideas could be like, put some nutmeg on your spaghetti bolognese, or put some lemon on your cod, or some mint with your lamb. Really simple, little, not transformative, not revelatory like recipes, just little inspiring little things to help people wake up their food. And so the whole campaign was try something new today. And it was basically celebrity chef Jamie Oliver giving people lots of little tips and tricks about how they could spice up their food and just add a little thing. And that got people to put an extra item in their basket, and an item happened to be about £1 at the time. To close it all off, we did the case study, we did the MMM, the econometric modeling. We saw that the try something new today idea was worth, over the course of the first 18 months, an incremental £1.9 billion worth of sales. So I think that prorated up does massively overachieve the 2.5 billion goal over 3 years. And the idea itself of try something new today, aside from the media used to deliver that idea, so the idea itself was worth, I think, about £500 million over that period. So if you're an agency and you've created out of just a bit of hot air and logic an idea like try something new today, you've created something vastly in excess of the value that you've been paid to generate that idea. And it's worth £500 million over a year and a half, but they were probably paid, I don't know, a few million per year to deliver and execute advertising around that. So we're massively underrated as an industry in terms of our ability to generate growth, and we've never found a way to value our ideas in a way that gets us paid what we're worth. So that's a whole nother problem.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, it's another issue.
That's another issue. Well, so that is amazing. Taking a huge, hairy goal and breaking it down into achievable numbers, identifying the channels and the ways you do it. It feels very strategic, but that was a good thing. What, like, do you have an example of like where it was just like, oh wow, what a dumpster fire here? Like, do you have any of those? You don't have to name names, Tom.
I'm really sorry, but I can't. I should just have I should just reel them off right now.
You got a fail reel. I have a big one.
Have you got one?
No, I'm not saying nothing. Everything's great always. Everything I always do is great.
I wish I'd done my homework and reread the questions you sent.
Well, how about can you just kind of give me a sort of brand strategy spaghetti, like just sort of like, man, that is going to be hard. Is it internal conflicts that create the inability to use brand strategy and leverage that? Is there some kind of, is it a budgetary thing? Is it just sort of like, what are the things that kind of add up to bad strategy? Well,
I think it's, what the biggest problem I think that we all face is probably just bad briefs and bad briefing. It's it sounds like a really boring answer, but it's like routinely, probably every week, we all see a brief that isn't brief, that's pages long, a brief that doesn't summarize a strategy because it's got everything. It's a basket of things, not a single inspiring problem. I think we just see them all the time, and that's why it's kind of hard for me to even come up with an example, because it just happens. It's so routine, and it's just a big problem in the industry that I think it's not just a client problem; it's an agency problem. We're just not very good at distilling our thinking into bigger problems, into more singular thoughts or ideas, and being really focused, because that's the only way you can get to bigger ideas, I think, is by distilling your thinking into just a big issue, a big challenge. And so much of what we see is very, very long, lengthy briefs or unclear briefs, or just like, pages and pages and pages of stuff that's just information that hasn't been distilled into something that's kind of actionable. And I think that relates to the Sainsbury's 2.5 billion thing. That was a good brief, actually, but the agency did a great job in distilling that further into something that was going to be a real springboard for creativity.
Awesome. So get your briefs tight. Make sure you're including some inspirational insights, from customers, or, thoughts or problems, unique ways, to kind of define those things. So get your brief right. And then all this wonderful stuff about marketing mix modeling, like all this great stuff about long-term, short-term, all this great stuff about channels, changing the way we're strategically, applying our thoughts here. I mean, you've given us so much amazing things to think about, but if you could, and you could consolidate this and cook it down for us, what would your one piece of advice to the audience be about brand strategy? What's your one piece of advice?
One piece of advice, God, I think brand strategy is a creative act. I don't think it's a scientific process. I think it's a simple process of distillation and just coming up with ideas. It always, to me, comes back to ideas. As soon as you get to a single tight idea, then you've got something that everybody can get behind and understand. And I think really good brand strategy tends to land on a really simple, singular thought. And so that would be my kind of my advice, really. I think we forget, and we think that strategy has to be PowerPoint or Google Slides, and it has to be 40 slides.
Omni-channel. You forgot to say omni-channel.
Oh God, yeah, no, I hate that word. But, we think it has to look like matrices of things.
Right.
We think it has to have customer journeys on it, and we think it has to have 5 phases or a funnel, or but more often than not, the thing that really unlocks like the creative process is going to be a simple singular idea, 2 or 3 words, and that's my, I don't know if that's a simple bit of advice, but let's please not think about brand strategy as PowerPoint or slides of any kind.
Right. Great advice from the man himself. Tom, you are amazing. You've given us so much of your time. You have to go back into the wild and live your life. But if people want to learn more about your work and connect online, how can they do that, Tom?
So I write blogs and articles. I've got a blog, which is thetomroach.com. SEO people keep telling me to buy tomroach.com, but it's currently thetomroach.com. Those articles also sometimes appear in Marketing Week, which is a kind of UK marketing title. I tweet a bit at Tom Roach. I'm on LinkedIn. I think I'm Tom Roach on LinkedIn. I can't remember. And I like many people, I went to Threads for a little while, but it was a bit boring, so I went back to Twitter, or now X. So probably find me there, although I'm Xing or tweeting a bit less than I used to, because it's become a bit thready and a bit full of AI hustlers, I have to say.
Yes.
But that's where I can be found.
Cheese or chocolate?
Are you ready?
Okay.
Cheese or chocolate?
Chocolate. No, cheese. Sorry.
Okay. Whoa, Tom.
No, weird.
The brief was right. The brief was tight.
I'm really sorry. It's cheese. Yeah, I'll
What time is it over there? It is cheese o'clock over there. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Yeah. You get the worm. Cilantro, is it great or is it garbage?
Oh shit! You call that No, I call that coriander.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes,
I'm
coriander.
not one of those people. I'm not one. Some people have a weird, a different genetic ability to taste it. It tastes of soap to them. I'm not one of those people.
So you're into it.
I'm into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So coriander. Good. Bagpipes or death?
My brother-in-law plays bagpipes.
So
and
death.
so bagpipes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I jumped the gun there. Stay in a haunted house or stay with the in-laws?
Well, my in-laws live like in our house. Like,
oh shit! Playing bagpipes in the house, Tom.
My mother-in-law lives with us in a converted barn. So that the second option.
Yes, well, obviously, because you just are there. And then finally, mohawk or mullet?
Oh, wow. Okay. My son has just chopped off his mullet. So a couple of months ago, I would have definitely said mullet. So let's go mullet.
Okay, good. Perfect.
What Gets Measured is a NinjaCat podcast. Please rate and review the show wherever you find your podcasts. Share this episode on social and visit us on the web at ninjacat.io.